Walter Hayes lived in silence at the edge of a quiet village, his past erased, his walls bare. For 50 years, he was the kind stranger who helped everyone and asked nothing in return. When the Dawsons moved next door, friendship bloomed until one celebration changed everything. The next morning, Walter woke behind bars and his new friend stood outside explaining how they'd found him. Walter Hayes had built a life from nothing. At the edge of a quiet village, his wooden house stood weathered and worn. Each morning, Walter woke before the sun touched the horizon. His routine never varied. Coffee brewed in the same chip mug. Toast burned to the same shade of brown. He dressed in simple clothes and stepped outside while the village still slept. The villagers knew Walter as the man who appeared when things broke down. A fence collapsed in a storm. Walter arrived with his toolbox before anyone could call for help. Children missed their school bus. His truck pulled up right on time, no questions asked. He never accepted payment. When people insisted on thanking him, Walter simply nodded and walked away. His kindness seemed endless, but his words were few. Conversations stayed shallow. Personal questions met gentle deflection. In a small village, some mysteries were allowed to remain. Years passed this way. Walter aged quietly, his hair turning white, his back bending slightly, but his hands stayed steady. The village accepted him as part of its fabric, the kind old man, the helpful neighbor. Nothing more needed to be known. Then the Dawsons arrived. Tom and Linda pulled up to the house next door in a moving truck, packed tight with furniture and boxes. They were around Walter's age, maybe a few years younger. Walter watched them unload from his porch. Then he stood, grabbed his tools, and walked over. Tom was struggling with a heavy dresser. Walter appeared at his side and lifted without a word. Tom and Linda tried to pay him. Walter refused. But the Dawsons were persistent. They invited him for coffee. Just once, they said, to say thank you properly. Days turned into weeks. The invitations continued. Coffee became dinner. Dinner became regular visits. For the first time in 50 years, Walter felt the warmth of friendship. One evening, Linda knocked on Walter's door with an invitation. They wanted to celebrate their first month in the village. A small gathering, just the three of them. The Dawson living room glowed that night. Tom poured drinks with a generous hand. The glasses clinked. Laughter bounced off the walls. The alcohol kept flowing. Tom refilled Walter's glass again and again. Walter didn't stop him. Then everything faded to black. Walter's eyes opened to harsh fluorescent light. His head pounded. His mouth tasted like metal. Concrete walls surrounded him on three sides. Iron bars made up the fourth. He sat up too quickly and his vision blurred. A police holding cell. His hands began to shake. The last clear memory was the Dawson living room. The warmth, the laughter, the drinks. Voices echoed from somewhere beyond the bars. Walter's entire body went cold. He recognized those voices. Tom, Linda. He moved to the bars and looked out. The Dawsons stood in the hallway with police officers. Papers were being signed. Official forms passed between hands. Tom's expression was serious. Linda's face showed something that might have been sadness or relief. An officer spoke to them. Walter heard every word clearly. The officer thanked them for helping locate him, for coming forward with information, for doing the right thing even though it must have been difficult. The officer mentioned how incredible it was that they'd been living right next door to him all along. Walter's knees nearly gave out. His only friends in 50 years, the people who'd made him feel human again, they were the ones who turned him in. Within days, Walter sat in a courtroom. The proceedings moved quickly. The statute of limitations would expire in less than 1 week. But they'd found him just in time, just barely. The memories Walter had buried rushed back with crushing force. 1974. A late night, a dark road. Walter had been driving home when he heard shouting. He pulled over. A man was harassing a woman on the roadside. Walter intervened, but the man turned his anger on Walter instead. Something inside Walter snapped. Anger he didn't know he carried erupted without warning. There was metal in his hand. He swung once. Hard. The man collapsed onto the pavement, motionless, completely still. Walter stood frozen. The woman screamed and ran. Walter looked at his hands, at the tire iron, at the body. Then he ran too. By morning, his face was on every television screen. For 50 years, he lived in silence. He built a life of penance through small acts of kindness. Every stranger he assisted without asking for anything. He was atoning, trying to become the man he wished he'd been that night. But the past had finally caught him. The judge delivered the sentence with a steady voice. Walter sat quietly in the defendant's chair. He didn't argue. He didn't plead for mercy. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Walter spoke softly. He said the good he did over the years, he did because he wanted to, because it was right. The wrong he did that night in 1974, he accepted full responsibility for. He'd been running from it for 50 years. He was tired of running. That night at the Dawsons celebration, the alcohol had done what 50 years of discipline couldn't. It had loosened Walter's tongue. Words he'd locked away spilled out. A name, a date, details of a crime he'd never told anyone. Tom and Linda had listened. They hadn't turned him in out of hatred. They simply believed that truth mattered, that justice, even delayed by 50 years, deserved its place. The final image showed Walter leaving the courtroom. His back was bent with age. His steps were slow. But somehow his shoulders looked lighter than they had in decades. What would you have done if you discovered your kind neighbor was hiding a dark secret from 50 years ago?